Hello and welcome. My name is Talitha if you don't know me, and today's video is going to be a little masterclass on liberating the blocks to our vocal expression, our authentic expression, our soul expression, our creative expression, okay? And ultimately this is not a shift that happens overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen in the course of a single video. This is a process that takes time. It can't be outsourced, right? So I'm not gonna liberate these blocks for you. Ultimately, this is something that's gonna happen within yourself, but I'm really passionate about supporting others in opening up to their voice and also cultivating safety within their body and inner resourcing, right? To really magnify and elevate their self-expression. I wanna name an objection that we have when it comes to voicing ourselves and our soul expression, something we all desire to do, but for many of us is really challenging. And that objection is the consequences of being heard, of being seen, of being witnessed, right? The rejection, the judgment, the misunderstanding, right? Being ridiculed, being punished, being ignored. I really want to name and acknowledge this objection because it's super valid. And if you've been working with these blocks to your vocal expression and self-expression, and you've been trying to bypass those objections a little bit and almost convince yourself that that's not a real issue, it's just a fear, you just have to stop thinking about it and power through and share yourself anyway, and that hasn't been working for you, I really want to not only name this objection, but acknowledge it and actually bring it into today's lesson. So in today's video, I want to offer you an opportunity to begin to orient to your vocal blocks, the blocks to your self-expression in a whole new way. And by orienting to them in this way, get to know them better, understand them and their highly intelligent purpose and function, and begin to form a relationship with them that's going to allow you through embodied practice to unwind and integrate those blocks rather than getting rid of them. So I want to begin this conversation in the body, because the blocks that we experience with regard to our vocal expression and self-expression are found within our human experience, which means they're found within our bodies. To be totally honest, this practice, right, this process is going to invite you to confront some really uncomfortable emotions and experiences, some sensations or memories that you might not want to revisit. And ultimately, we move slowly, right? We don't overshoot our capacity. We don't push our own boundaries. But when it comes to the integration of our blocks, we're really talking about confronting that which is unresolved within us that manifests as a block. There are consequences to sharing, speaking, and expressing your truth, your voice, and your essence. That's why I named that objection at the beginning of this video. The consequence to sharing ourselves is more often than not a rupture in connection. And we need to understand that yes, on a soul spirit level, you are connected to everything and you don't need anyone. But when it comes to the physiology of your human form, of your animal body, and of your nervous system, we have to acknowledge that connection, especially for children, is essential for survival. And when we have a rupture in connection and we lose that connection, that is registered as a massive consequence, and it's registered as a massive threat and a loss of safety and well-being. This is the consequence that we fear. The rupture in connection, for us, that might look different. For some of us, it might be being ignored and never really being seen or noticed. For others, it might be being actively punished or rejected or ridiculed, right? We're going to have our own sort of experience when it comes to rupture. We're going to have our own fear points to work with. But ultimately, we have to acknowledge the truth that our physiological human form is holding when we start to work with these really deep blocks in our system. Yes, you are an infinite being and nothing can hurt you. And you have everything you need, and you are already on some plane, on some dimension, embodying and expressing who and what you are. And you're a human body that has limitations, that has had experiences that lie unresolved in your system. You are a human being with a nervous system that requires connection to feel safe and to survive. And as long as we cannot acknowledge the other half of our experience, which is our human experience, we can get caught in a cycle of bypass where we have all the realizations and we do the work and we have the breakthroughs, but nothing fundamentally shifts in the way we feel in these moments. Because the truth of your soul, of your higher self, of your spirit is you can do whatever you want. You're an infinite being. Nothing can hurt you. Just surrender to yourself and share who you are. That's the truth and knowing that you hold on a sort of spirit, soul level. But when it comes to the physicality of your human body, right, there's a very different truth. And the truth is there are consequences to sharing your truth. Your body knows this because your body has experienced the consequences. You have had experiences in your life where sharing your truth, your expression, caused you to be rejected, judged, misunderstood, punished, ridiculed, ignored, etc. And those consequences are living within your body as active data points, unresolved active data points that literally lead to patterns, physiological patterns of holding, of bracing, of contracting against your self-expression. So ultimately, the block to your vocal expression is not really a block, and it's certainly not something that needs to be gotten rid of. Rather, it's an objection that's asking to be deeply acknowledged, deeply witnessed, supported, and integrated. So how does that integration take place? First, we have to reorient to the way in which we perceive this objection. We need to begin to acknowledge that it is a highly intelligent protective mechanism that our body performs in service to us. We acknowledge that the objection, more often than not, is an unresolved experience, a literal physiological charge in the body, in the tissue, that remains unresolved. So think about the way it feels to be blocked. Right? We can feel this literal buildup of energy that seems to get in the way and impede the flow of our own energy, of our own expression. How it can often feel like there's something that literally holds us back or restrains us. It can even be felt as a contraction in the body. And think of then all the belief systems that would manifest from that physiological pattern, from experiences that never found resolve. If you have had countless experiences of expressing yourself and being shut down, denied, shamed, ignored, punished, rejected, not only does your mind form belief systems in response to those experiences, your body holds on to the experiences. And in a sense, there's sort of aspects of you that are frozen in time in those moments, still seeking resolve, still seeking safety, still seeking connection. And so when it comes to you stepping up and sharing your voice, singing a song, saying something true and vulnerable and honest, it's deeply challenging for your body to find safety in that moment, safety enough to soften and express. If there are all of these moments in your history, in the history of your body, that remain unresolved. that are still seeking resolution. You know on some level that you don't need to be afraid to be who you are. You know on some level that who you are is perfect and beautiful, and that you can share and be whatever you want in this reality, and that all the fears that you have are just illusions. You know that on some level, but what your body knows is a different story. And to me, spiritual embodiment begins to happen when we're able to hold, be with, and embody the paradox of truth, the paradox of our spiritual and human experience. So this objection, which is really an unresolved experience, an unresolved charge or energy in your physiological body that acts as a data point, right? That your body constantly references and shapes itself around, needs to be integrated. And we integrate this experience by giving it what it didn't get, supporting it in the ways it needed to be supported but never was. We can imagine here that there's a circuit that's like incomplete, right? Because typically in moments of rupture, right, something happens that is really activating and overwhelming for us, right? Like being ridiculed or shamed or rejected or ignored. That experience is too much for us to handle, especially when we're children. It's beyond what we can hold. And very often, most of the time, no one else steps in, an adult, a caregiver, to support us to hold that experience. And so we're just left with it. And instead of finding safety at the other end of that moment of rejection, right, or punishment or whatever it is, instead of finding safety and connection at the end of that experience, which allows us to complete the circuit, or instead of being allowed to do what our body needs to do to offset that charge, the charge of that fear, of that hurt, of that shame, we're left completely unsupported and unresourced. And so we're left with this experience that has no resolve. And when something doesn't have a resolve, it doesn't have a completion. And so we can imagine all of these incomplete processes and experiences within our body, that every time we go to speak and express, our body references. And our body, in a way, has already learned to shape itself around those experiences. So if we understand our sacred impulse, right, as an impulse of both spirit and body, an impulse that predominantly expresses through motor impulse, through movement, through sound. And we begin to notice how throughout our life, the sacred impulse that wanted to move through us was slowly shut down in one way or another. And we had to face the consequences of not being received in our sacred impulse. And we begin to, as a protection mechanism, brace against the impulse, resist the impulse, because the impulse we have found in our experience to be unsafe, to threaten our connection with others, and in a sense, to threaten our survival and our well-being. I speak to the sacred impulse much more deeply in a video I previously released. I'm going to link it in the description below if you want to hear much more deeply about the sacred impulse and what it can look like when we start to brace against it and how that shows up as a pattern in the body. So we practice this resist against the sacred impulse, this bracing. We learn to withhold it because we have learned that it is not safe. And this becomes a physiological pattern in your body, a physiological pattern of contraction. It's not just a belief system. This unresolved charge and experience is in your physiological tissue, and your tissue responds and your body responds, and it shapes and patterns itself around it. And the bracing of the impulse leads us to, of course, literally resist our impulse and become increasingly over time less expressive of who we truly are because we don't feel that it will be received. But it also leads us to dissociate from the presence of our impulse. So if you resist the impulse of joyful expression because you were never supported in your joyful expression, or you were judged for it, or ignored. Over time, as you practice that brace against your joyful expression, you will begin to dissociate from the awareness of the joy itself. And so bracing often leads to dissociation. If you have learned to brace against your anger and do not express anger ever in your life, you probably don't feel it. And the dissociation is also a protective mechanism, because it's really difficult to be with something that we're not allowed to express or fulfill. It's really difficult to be with an experience that we don't feel like we're allowed to be with. Imagine that you're in communication with someone and something sparks in you during that conversation, and you find yourself expressing organically from that spark. Maybe there's a spark of joy or grief or sadness or anger, right? And you find yourself organically responding to that impulse within you. And as you share, you notice the other person maybe withdraw, or maybe there's a look of judgment on the face, or maybe they even react negatively to what you just said, right? And I want you to really tune into your body as you imagine this moment. The moment of noticing that other person didn't receive me, right? Maybe they don't even acknowledge the moment, or maybe they retaliate against it. And notice what happens in your body simply by imagining that, or maybe remembering a moment like that. How you go from this open, softened, outward expression, vulnerable, right? Revealed, to closing, contracting, withdrawing. Maybe it brings up a fight impulse in you and it makes you actually want to move forward and against. Now imagine in that moment, if that person were to catch how their response created an experience in you. Imagine if that person were to stop and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just realized I reacted in a way that you didn't need to receive. That's my own thing." And was actually able to, after that moment of rupture, connect to you and acknowledge the feelings that you had in being rejected or ignored, and allow you to complete that experience by finding safety and connection. Imagine how every time when you are with that person in the future, you will feel increasingly more safe to be and express yourself, not because they never reacted negatively to you, but because in those moments of rupture, of consequence, you were both able to find safety and connection and repair. And you essentially were supported and acknowledged in your experience, which allowed you to integrate it. Now imagine that same person in that moment doesn't catch their response or reaction. And you're left with this feeling of, I said something wrong, I shared too much, I opened up too much. And imagine how every time you connect with that person now, your body will be physiologically, highly intelligently braced. And there'll be this subconscious, if not very conscious awareness of, I better be careful of how much I reveal. I better not go to that place again. That person doesn't like my anger. That person doesn't like too much joy and excitement from me, or whatever it is. And so we can imagine this playing out sort of on a larger stage with all of the world, with everyone we might interact with. It's not about never experiencing a consequence in response to your expression, because when you start to express yourself, there will be consequence. People will not like your truth. People will be triggered by your joy. People will be maybe revolted by too much grief or sadness or emotion. Whatever it is, people are going to respond negatively to your expression. And we have to acknowledge the consequence, because otherwise we're gaslighting the part of our bodies that are deeply afraid of that consequence. And so by allowing ourselves to begin to resolve these experiences in the body that lie unresolved and find completion and safety in those moments, and teach our bodies, we can hold these moments of charge. We can hold these moments of activation, right? And by integrating those experiences, there's actually less charge in the body to reference. The body doesn't have to keep shaping itself in this way because the charge and unresolved experience that leads to the shaping has been integrated and released. And then we begin to build this really interesting relationship to the experience of rupture or consequence. And that is that we actually start to develop a sense of safety even within the consequence, even within the rupture. This ability to go, ooh, there was a rupture here. You did not receive me. You didn't like what I just said. You were a little triggered by that. You were a little put off by that. And we're able to notice these moments. And even whether or not the other person can meet us and acknowledge us, we learn to acknowledge ourselves. We learn to hold that experience in our body. And we learn how to find safety in those moments. And that safety is found through the body. One way that I like to describe this, and the way that I've personally experienced it, when we're able to resolve some of these incomplete circuits or experiences in the body, is almost like going back in time, traveling back in time through the body, right? Through the unresolved experiences in the body, sensations in the body, and allowing ourselves to be with the emotions and sensations that we couldn't be with, that we didn't have the capacity to be with at that time, and to show up and resource that version of ourselves through the present somatic experience in whatever way is necessary. So allowing for the movement, for the expression, for the holding, for the support, for the love, for the connection, whatever it is. And by allowing for that experience to find completion and resolution, to me, it feels as if we almost change the past, or like we create almost an alternative or alternate timeline where we got what we needed in that moment. And so our past might be the same. That still happened. That trauma happened. We didn't get the support we needed. But our body no longer holds the unresolved story of that experience. And it almost seems to now be more aligned with the sort of alternate timeline where we were able to resource ourselves. And so ultimately, the work of truly liberating your vocal expression and integrating these blocks is learning how to resource yourself and be the support you did not receive. Not just supporting yourself on a mental, cerebral level, not just supporting yourself with intellectual idea and knowing, supporting and resourcing yourself physiologically. So to close this conversation, we are going to move through a guided somatic practice, okay? Because I want to ground this conversation into your body and just begin to give you a felt sense of what it is we're talking about. So we're going to map out this sort of brace pattern, the block, the objection, whatever we want to call it. We're actually going to map that out in the body, and we're going to get a sense for it somatically, because most likely you understand it mentally, right? You probably know the fears, right? You probably know your stories, okay? But I really want you to put all of the story and narrative aside and really get a felt somatic sense of what this actually looks like and feels like when your body performs it. So what happens when you are faced with a judgment, misunderstanding, right? Being ignored, being punished, being ridiculed, right? When your body is faced with the threat of rejection for your self-expression, what happens in the body? How has your body learned to shape itself around this fear and experience? So I want to invite you to drop into your body, and you can close your eyes if that feels good for you. If at any point it starts to feel overwhelming or intense, know that you can always open your eyes, connect to where you are, and that's going to register a lot of safety for your body, okay? So if at any point it gets too much, open your eyes, look around you, and really check into where you are, okay? So we're just going to start turning our awareness within. Just notice your body. What does your body feel like right now? Whatever you're able to feel, okay? Notice the shoulders, the spine. Feel into your chest and your belly. Notice your hips, your pelvis, your legs, feet and hands, face. Notice any sensations that are present. No matter how subtle they are, just notice what's happening in the body. And now we're just going to tune into this moment, and it can be a memory or it can be an imagined moment of you sharing yourself with the world. And you're sharing yourself really vulnerably, you're really opening yourself up. And as you begin to imagine that moment, notice the fear and resistance that comes up in your body. And rather than bypassing it, you're actually going to lean into that. And you don't have to feel 100% of that fear. You can just feel 30%. The fear of being judged, of being seen and misunderstood, of being rejected, of being ignored, of being punished, whatever it might be. You're actually going to give permission for your body to feel just 30% of that feeling. And you can really imagine yourself in this moment. And tune into the part of your body that wants to hold you back. You're actually tuning into the block. And notice where you feel that energy or sensation the most. And maybe you can't feel it. Maybe it's more of an intuitive sense, and that's also beautiful. And you're going to notice, what shape does your body want to take as you feel that feeling? How does your body want to shape itself? I notice for me that my shoulders start to creep in. I literally try to make my body smaller. My legs pull together. My arms pull in and want to cover my chest and belly. My head wants to tuck down. I get tight, I get contracted and very protected. And your expression might be different. Maybe you try to move away or avoid. Maybe you reach forward. Maybe you feel like you dissociate and just sort of go numb or limp. Okay, and you don't have to go all the way into the feeling if it's really intense. Just gonna feel 30%, 40% of it. And really allow your body to express and perform and play out the feeling. How does this block want you to shape yourself? And what happens if you go all the way in? What does your face want to do when you feel that block? What shape does the face want to take? What does your jaw do? Does it tighten? Does it want to open? Right? What happens in the shoulders and the arms? How do you feel in your belly and chest? What about the legs? Can you feel your legs, or do your legs sort of tap out a little bit? Maybe it's hard to feel them. You're just noticing and giving permission rather than trying to avoid this fear and this block and this resistance. You're actually going to let your body fully perform the brace of withholding against the impulse because it's not safe. And then you can maybe relax for a moment and come out of the shape. Just do a little movement, maybe breathe, okay? And then see as you sort of relax if you can enter that brace again. And you're really getting to know the shape the body takes. And maybe you start to notice sensations in the body. Maybe a certain part of the body seems to light up with sensation. Maybe a certain part of the body goes very numb and is void of sensation. Just going to notice that. Maybe you perceive energies or colors or images, right? And you're going to allow for all of that input as well. Maybe there are particular emotions that come up, feelings, right? And you're just going to notice those emotions. You don't have to name them or know what they are. Just see if you can feel them just a little bit. Notice them. And you're going to notice as you feel this brace, does your body feel activated? Does it feel like you want to do something about this? Maybe you feel sort of collapsed, like there's nothing you can do about it. And whatever you feel is okay, it's perfect. Just gonna notice what's actually there. And know that you can always come out of this brace, do a little bit of movement, sort of softening and relaxing the body, and then coming back into it. And really see how comfortable you feel to fully perform the brace. Maybe you want to curl into a ball and cover your head. You know, maybe you feel like you want to get up and run away. Maybe you want to use your hands and arms to reach out to try and connect or to fight or to resist. And maybe there's just disconnection. You're really going to notice, how does the body, the human primal animal body, want to respond? How is it trying to protect you in this moment? And we're not coming to conclusions in our head about this. We're just feeling it in the body. Maybe there's a sentence that wants to be spoken. Maybe there's something you want to say. For me, there's this sentence of like, don't look at me. Go away, don't look at me. Right? So feel that brace. Feel the sensation. Feel the impulse. And notice if it could say something, what would it say? And can you allow yourself to say that out loud? So now we're going to come out of that brace. We're going to start just inviting the body to come out of whatever shape it was in. Just start to invite some softening into the body. So you're going to notice where you felt most contracted or tight, or the most sensation or the most numbness. Just going to start bringing a little bit of movement into those areas. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of rotate my hips a little bit, bring a little movement into my legs, feel my feet on the floor. I'm going to make sure my eyes are open, okay? And I'm going to look around the room. I'm going to notice where I am. That was an imagined moment that we just had. This is where we are, right? Gonna maybe roll the shoulders a little bit, maybe move the neck, take some deep, mindful breaths. Maybe I wanna move the arms for a moment. I'm just gonna invite you really, if you're not moving, please move. Even just teeny, tiniest movements are beautiful. And we're just noticing, what does it feel like to invite the body out of that contraction and brace? What does it feel like to slowly invite some softening into the tissue, into the muscle? And how can we resource our body, especially those parts of the body that were most activated or affected by the experience, right? And maybe some self-touch, right? So I'm just inviting my shoulders to sort of find not only softness, but to find sort of width again, to be broad and take up space. I'm gonna relax my jaw to soften. Maybe it got a little tight or clenched. Okay. And I'm just gonna really be present as I call my body out of that contraction, out of that brace, that activation, and back into this space of safety and of connection. And one of the easiest ways I create connection, or the sensation or experience of connection in my body, is through self-touch. Okay. And so this practice was not intended to clear or release anything. Okay. The intention of this practice is for you to start mapping out your patterns, your somatic patterns of brace, and to get a little bit of a glimpse of what is happening under the surface whenever this fear of expression comes out. Because the more conscious we can become of these patterns, the more we start to notice them. And the more we notice them, the more we can actively work with them. It can also be supportive to practice what it feels like to come out of that contraction, and to learn how our body likes to be resourced in moments of activation or contraction, right? To be able to actually remind our body of where we are, of the safety of the moment, and invite it back into a little more softness, a little more openness and receptivity. So my invitation is for you to really notice what came up in that little mini practice. What are the patterns you noticed? What shape does your body really want to take as an expression of that block or objection or fear? What emotions came up? Were there particular emotional textures that were really present for you? Was there a sentence or maybe a couple of sentences, right, that came up from your body, right, around this experience? Were there images that came to you? Were there certain colors or sensations? And as we begin to map our somatic pattern, we can begin to notice as we move through our day, and I really invite you over the next week, see if you can notice when you interact with others, whether that's, talking to a friend, whether that's interacting with a person, in the flesh, or whether that's even sharing yourself on social media, okay? Anytime you are meeting, your expression is meeting another, just see if you can notice. You might not remember, right, because this is a new practice, but see if you can notice how your body might slip into that brace, And the more we can notice that pattern, the more we can start to work with it. So there might be moments of, ooh, that was a little intimidating, or ooh, this was a little, activating, or ooh, I'm a little scared to say this thing or share myself in this way. And the thing is, you don't actually have to force the expression. I'm personally not a huge fan of that, right? I'm much more interested in what if you just learn to be deeply present with yourself as you braced against the expression? Because most of the time, when we are bracing against an expression, we also dissociate from our desire to have that expression. So we go, oh, I want to say this thing. Oh, no, I can't. And then we sort of lock it away. Or maybe we don't even know that we want to say that thing. And so rather than forcing an expression, especially when we don't feel safe to do so yet, and it's going to be super activating and overwhelming and potentially stressful, what if we just started to notice the moment of, I want to say this, and then my body just resisted that. My body just braced against that thing. And what if we just notice that? Sit in it, be in it, acknowledge the sensation, acknowledge the fear, and see how you can resource yourself in that moment. You don't actually have to force the expression, but the more you start to become conscious of the impulse to express as well as the brace against the expression, this is when the magic happens. You know that this practice is working when you become increasingly more aware of the impulse that wants to come through you, as well as your body's brace against that impulse. And when you notice that you're becoming more able to be with that moment rather than tapping out. You'll also know that this practice is working when you feel like you can begin to resource those moments, even if it's just by like the tiniest percent. So going from a charge or experience that's like 75% and just being able to bring it down to like 70% through some little moment of resourcing is really, really significant. Because over time, that resourcing, right, it builds over time, it compounds, right? And we become more able to hold because our capacity grows and deepens to hold. And we become more able to not only notice, but to respond and be resourced in our awareness and our responsibility. That is all for today's masterclass and practice. You're welcome to share your experience in the comments. I do love to hear just about how everyone experiences this, because it's such a subjective thing. So if you want to share about what maybe the practice felt like for you, if there were images or colors or sensations or emotions that came up, maybe there was other intuitive input that arose for you, maybe there's a piece that's just stood out within the sort of masterclass teaching portion of this video. Maybe you sort of have your own wisdom codes that you want to drop that arise for you in response to this video, your own experiences of deepening in your relationship to your vocal sort of blocks and liberating them. It's been such a joy to share this with you, and stay tuned for the next installment. We're going to drop even deeper into just creating space in the body in service to liberation of our vocal blocks and the expression of our sacred impulse.